Coming to you from the Sherpa Chalet at the top of beautiful downtown Mount Podcastia, it's a special episode of Too Many Podcasts. I'm Jim the Podcast Sherpa, and today it's a special episode where I get to speak with people from the entertainment industry. So get yourself an aisle seat, pop up some popcorn, and get a cold drink ready, and sit back. Don't crunch too loud, or else you'll miss the interview from the Sherpa Screening Room. Hey there, Rebels of the Sherpalution. Did you know that you were listening to the Sherpa Screening Room, a production of Too Many Podcasts? And did you know that it's me, Jim the Podcast Sherpa? Of course you did. Did you also know that I was a Child Actor Week? Well, we've got 3 shows featuring 3 actors who were, in fact, actors when they were children. And today is one of them. And we will be speaking to Mr. Scott Schwartz, who was the star of the movie The Toy. And he was also featured in Christmas Story and Kidco and did about 100 or so commercials and did Broadway. We'll be talking to him and catching up on his life. And did you know, I bet you knew this one too, that this episode is being brought to you by Audible. That's where you can get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/Sherpa. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. And did you know that my interview with Scott Schwartz will be starting just about now? No, you didn't know that because I just made that up. Hey, Rebels, I am talking to today's guest via Zoom. Of course, we're going high-tech here. And at first, he was a little hesitant to do it, but I double-dog dared him to come on to the interview. And he said, well, why not? You may have known him as a child actor previously in some iconic movies such as The Toy and A Christmas Story, but he's done a lot more with his life even afterwards, and we're going to talk about his life as a child actor and some of the stuff that he's doing today, which is really amazing. So say hello to Mr. Scott Schwartz. Hey, Scott, how's it going?
Hello there, Big Jim.
Thank you so much for coming on down to the show.
Yes, sir. Yes, you had to twist my arm, no question.
So you started really young. Your first job was a Yoo-Hoo commercial through your dad's friend?
Yeah, it was a film club that we were attending, a co-op society. And I was 8. I mean, I wasn't young. I mean, there were many that have started, younger than me. They started at 3, 4, 5. That's when it happened.
You were a big movie buff even as a young kid.
Yeah, that's what the place was. It was a film co-op society, and every Saturday we go in the city. We would go see movies at 44th and Broadway, and then we'd end up on 42nd Street seeing a double feature. And then every Saturday night at this place called Joe's Place at the co-op, we would just watch old movies. So, I mean, it was all of the serials from the 40s and 50s, 30s, 40s, 50s, B-Westerns, every comedy, anything you can think of, they played it.
So even as a young actor, you built up a resume pretty quickly up until the time you auditioned for your first movie, The Toy.
I did over 100 commercials, off-Broadway, voiceovers. So, I mean, you build as you go. It wasn't one of those things where, I was seen on the street and they went, oh my God, you need to be in this movie. No, it didn't happen like that. There were thousands and thousands of drives into New York and back home from our home in New Jersey. There's a lot of, they say blood, sweat, and tears, but, it was more like sitting on your tush in the car and you driving through the Lincoln Tunnel. But it was, a lot of years of that. And then it just progressed. And then I got lucky and fortunate enough to get into The Toy.
You auditioned several times and finally
9 times.
Well, they're definitely persistent, if nothing else.
That was the process. I mean, they were seeing pretty much not only every kid in show business, across the country. Then there was the Toys R Us thing that they did. They had a Jackie Gleason lookalike contest, which was more or less just like they took a photo of a kid if he looked like Gleason. They were just basically building an audience for the film. But they actually did bring a kid out to California for what they called a screen test, which really wasn't because he had no talent, but he did kind of look like Jackie Gleason, I guess, from what they told me. But they probably saw something around 8 to 10,000 kids in show business for The Toy, something in that neighborhood.
Definitely, you had the chops behind you too at that age as well.
I mean, it's a combination of things. The fact that I was a movie buff, it helped. It really did, because by the time I got through the first audition processes, we're basically just like, hi, how you doing, whatever. Then you get to the part parts where you're starting to read dialogue, okay. When push came to shove and it was the screen test and they sort of wound me up, like a wind up and said go, I was able to just let loose, knew who Richard Pryor was. I knew who Jackie Gleason was. I knew how to tell jokes. I was fun. And they wanted somebody they thought would be able to bounce off of Richard Pryor as opposed to being a scared kid. And I wasn't scared at all.
How did you like working with him? I mean, I'm sure you probably built up a pretty good friendship with him, I understand.
Well, we'll start with Richard, the most gracious, non-egotistical human being I had ever met. And probably still have ever met. The guy was, he was an icon. He was already, the biggest movie star and number one this and whatever, and no ego at all. I mean, I met him in Richard Donner, the director's office, and I said, hello, Mr. Pryor. It's nice to meet you. He goes, oh, no. You call me Rich, Dick. I don't care what you call me. Mr. Pryor is my father. Just call me Richard. We'll be just fine. Okay. Gracious, kind. We had a blast. We talked anything. Didn't make any difference. Even subjects I had no knowledge of at all, like women. Here I am, pre-puberty, 13, 14 years old. I had no idea, stuff that he was saying a lot of times. I just kind of went along with it. Okay, fine. That sounds great. A wonderful human being that I was friends with from the day I met him until the day he was gone. Jackie Gleason, different duck there. He was an egomaniac, no question. He demanded respect. He commanded respect, but he deserved the respect because when you're in show business for 50-something years, 40 plus years, you've put in your time. So, I mean, on the set, it was Mr. Gleason. Richard Donner was Richard or Dick Donner. Ray Stark was Ray. Richard Pryor was Richard. Ned Beatty is Ned. Mr. Gleason is Mr. Gleason. But he and I had a good rapport. Again, this was based on my history. I knew who he was. I was a fanatic. I loved The Hustler. I was just a Smokey and the Bandit junkie. The Honeymooners. So I would do impressions of him to him. And it's the highest form of flattery. Now, I never planned on that at 8, 9, 10, 11 years old saying, oh, yes, one day I'm going to do a movie with him. So I'm going to be prepared. It's not like going to the acting school. It was just, I was a fan and I would do him and he would just laugh. I mean, he just really got a kick out of it. So it really helped with the friendship that grew from it.
You could definitely see the chemistry between all three of you on, in different scenes in that movie. There was definitely a believability that the relationship that you had with Gleason as your dad and with Richard Pryor as the toy.
It's not like it's something that you can plan, but if you would have stuck somebody else in there and they didn't have the understanding or the knowledge of each of their backgrounds as I did, I don't think the results would have been the same. And that doesn't make me special or nothing like that. That's what happened. My parents were never one to worry about language use and none of that stuff. So when you're 13 years old and you're on a set, Richard drops an F-bomb and you drop one right after him, nobody freaked out. Nobody on the set went, oh my God, we need to call social service. We need to get... No, it was what we did. Again, my love of him as an actor, almost every other day, or pretty much every day, was doing impressions of him from something else, mostly Honeymooners and Smoking the Bandit. He wanted to sort of repay that. And there were times like when we were shooting at the big house, what we called the plantation house. We had lots of downtime. That's what movie making is. You shoot for 5 minutes and you're down for half an hour. He took me in the room where the pool table was and taught me how to shoot pool. He had never done anything like that. His assistant at one point told my dad, he's like, listen, I got to tell you something. I have been with Jackie for 35 years. Hates working with kids, hates working with animals, but man, does he love your kid.
Now that's got to be an ultimate compliment from anybody.
Yes, to some degree. Just say, that he likes the kid. Okay, that's nice. That's one thing. The actual ultimate compliment came later. The last time I saw him about a year before he passed, I went to his home in Florida. There's a whole story of how I got in and how I found his house and all that stuff. The long story short when I got to the house, saw his wife. She gave me a hug and a kiss. He's in the back, whatever. He was in his little patio behind the house enclosed, I said, "Hey, Pop, how you doing?" And he just looks at me and he goes, "Kid, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I got my driver's license now, and I got to fly on a plane, and I come down here, and we talked for a good 40 minutes, and I'm getting ready to leave, and I asked him to sign a couple things of, that were from the toy for me, whatever. I gave him a hug and a kiss on the cheek, goodbye, and he kissed me on the cheek, and he grabbed both my shoulders, and he says, "I want to tell you something real quick." He says, "I've been around a long time. I've seen a lot of people come and go. You have the chops, and you have what it will take to stay in this business for a long time. You are a very talented young man." That was the biggest compliment I could have ever gotten from him.
I can only imagine. I think my jaw would have probably hit the ground if I heard something from such a legendary actor and comedian.
The things you don't think about, there's no cell phone cameras back then. I could have sat down and just done an interview or something just for historic sake, just for something for me to keep, something so I could have that on tape or something. Nope, it's just something he said, and I'm there, and that was it.
Well, it's good that you had to have that memory to stay with you for such a long time, though.
Of course.
That's a great present.
Forever.
The next year, you were in another movie. Well, I think some people might remember the scene that you were in. For those of you who don't know, Scott was Flick in A Christmas Story, and he was in the iconic scene where sticks his tongue out and got it stuck to the frozen pole. That didn't really happen, but...
Well, no, of course not. I mean, there's a film I did in the middle of the two of them called Kidco for 20th Century Fox, which was a much smaller production. For me, it was my personal favorite. I'm in 98% of the film. It was kind of like Lucas with Corey Haim. It was for him, that was his role. And what I did in Kidco to me was my role. And, the poster is me, although, the big thing is me and all that. I was most proud of Kidco, but everybody wants to talk about Christmas Story that I'm in 6 minutes. I am like the soup Nazi of Christmas Story. Because I'm only in a small little bit of it, and yet decades, that's what everybody loves. I've actually talked to Larry Thomas about this, who played the soup Nazi in Seinfeld. He's got like 5 minutes of footage or something in the entire series of all those years. But everybody remembers the soup Nazi, and it's like Christmas Story with me with the tongue on the pole. I'm in like 6 minutes of footage, but yet it's an iconic scene. People love it. It's how'd you do it? Oh my God. And I was working 1 day a week, man. I was like on vacation. It's just like, all right, this is great.
And there was a statue erected of the scene in Gene Shepard's hometown?
Yeah, Hammond, Indiana. If anybody's in the Midwest listening and you go just south of Chicago into Indiana on the interstate there, the Welcome Center, which is like, they have one at every state when you're traveling through or whatever on the roads. They have a bronze statue of me out front as Flick. And they called me and told me what they were doing. And I flew to Chicago, met the guy that designed it and made the whole thing. And he had like 12,000 images of my face, every angle to every centimeter, millimeter. I mean, it was wild. I was gracious would be really like the wrong word to say. I was amazed. The guy who did my statue is the same guy that did Jordan's statue, Jerry Buss's bust on his gravesite, the owner of the Lakers. I think he did Gordie Howe's statue, the bronze statues. I mean, this guy was huge. So you got all these people, and then he's doing me. And I'm like, really? So he was a very nice man. But, they told me, they asked me on my permission, could they do it? Blah, blah, blah. And sure, it's wild. It's just, there's approximately 30 statues of actors around the world. There's one of Jean-Claude Van Damme. There's one of Jackie Chan. There's a Schwarzenegger. There's, Lucille Ball and Henry Winkler. Now, it's sort of funny that The Toy is the only film ever made in the history of cinema, this is really wild, where 3 of the stars of the movie, they all have bronze statues. Jackie Gleason has his bronze statue for The Honeymooners in New York. Richard Pryor has his statue in Peoria, Illinois, in his hometown. And my statue from Christmas Story is sitting in Hammond, Indiana.
That is a really cool and unusual honor at the same time.
Listen, I mean, I could sit here and go, it was an honor to have this and how wonderful and blah, blah. You know what? Realistically, that statue and $5 gets me a cup of coffee and a bacon, egg, and cheese croissant at Dunkin' Donuts. That's really what it does. It's something for a legacy kind of thing, that you've left something behind that people just love, and they want to go there and they want to be joyous and happy, and it's a great memory. Is it an ego thing? I had nothing to do with it. They picked me. I didn't call and ask. But it's pretty cool when you look at the overall, and it's not from an ego standpoint, but you can see kind of behind me a lot of friends of mine, people I've met along the journey. And you go, okay, well, let's see. There's Roy Rogers, Michael Paré, Davy Sharp. There's John Travolta. There's people I've met, whatever. Kurt Russell, Wayne Newton. There's not a bronze statue of them. There's not one of George Clooney or Tom Cruise or Julia Roberts or Reese Witherspoon or any, Gal Gadot. No. Tom Hanks. Nope. But there's one of me. I mean, that's funny. And again, $5, I still get my cup of coffee and a donut. Yeah.
And just because, we are conducting our interview on video, as I said, there are probably, about 50 or 60 autographed photographs on the walls behind you?
I don't know about that many.
But
you see who it is, though, right?
Is that Charlton Heston?
That is Charlton Heston from the Ten Commandments. Absolutely. I got a chance to meet him, and I have a beautiful 16 by 20 he signed to me. Actually, the wall behind me, that is my Friends That I Miss wall. There's Carrie Fisher and Tony Curtis, otherwise known as my Uncle Bernie Schwartz, Dana Plato, Sherman Helmsley, and Corey Haim.
That actually brings up another question. You've known all these celebrities. Was there anyone that you were truly starstruck over, or you just felt comfortable as a peer?
There's different emotions and feelings meeting anybody that you don't really know. When I met John Travolta, I'm going to show you the picture here because I know we're just on audio, but look at that, okay? I am 12 years old in that photo, and I was doing Broadway, so this was before the movies. I'm doing Broadway, and the woman in the play that was playing my governess, like my she took care of me, whatever. My babysitter, we'll just call it. Her husband was doing a show, and she kind of let the cat out of the bag that Travolta was coming to see the show this one night. And man, I begged her and pleaded with her, please, because this is 1980. This is Travolta in his prime. This was Saturday Night Fever to me really wasn't anything because I hadn't really watched it yet, but I knew what Grease was. I knew what Welcome Back Kotter was. I finally talked her into it, and he was just as sweet could be. Meeting Muhammad Ali, definitely it was like, holy Toledo. I was at a Michael Nunn fight with Sugar Ray Leonard. We were having some lunch, and I was having lunch with Ray, and Muhammad comes over, and I'm like, Ray, can you introduce me? He says, sure. So he tells Muhammad who I am, and I said, it's very nice to meet you. He's, oh man, it's nice to meet you too. Oh, I gotta tell you something. Oh, you and Richard, you were so funny. Oh, you were so funny with Richard. Oh, I love the Richard. And I said, Muhammad, can I get a picture? You gotta come over and get a picture. Oh, you made me laugh. Oh, you so funny. Meeting Charlton Heston, you're like, oh my God, it's Charlton Heston. Here's a funny one. I'm at the Donnie Lalonde Sugar Ray Leonard fight, and I'm on the little perch that was on like the second deck, and I see Bo Derek. I'm like, oh, that's cool, Bo Derek. And I actually went over and got a picture with her. My head was so far up my tush that I didn't even realize that standing next to her was John Derek. Her husband was standing next to her. Joshua from the Ten Commandments is standing next to me, and I never even said hello to the man, but he's sort of like half in my picture with me.
You want to slide over a little bit, buddy?
But I didn't even, it wasn't, it's not, I don't ever say that somebody who is an icon or has put in their decades of whatever is a peer to me. I learned that from Gleason, they deserve respect. They command respect. You give them respect. I met Barry Manilow and Neil Diamond, and it was just like, it was great. I lived across the street for a while from Neil Diamond's sister. So when I met Neil, I said, Mr. Diamond, it's a pleasure. I said, I've actually met your sister several times. She lived across the street from me. He's like, really? And I said, yeah. I told him the name of the street, and he goes, yeah, she does live on that street. It's nice to meet you. How are you? Manilow was just wonderful. Just a great guy. There were people that I didn't get to meet that I wish I would have met. I wish I had a camera that I could have, whatever, but those things happen. People are people. It's how you treat them. If you go up to somebody and you're a blithering idiot, that's the reaction you're going to get. But if you just say, hey, hi, so-and-so, be respectful. You know what? It's just a pleasure to meet you. I've been a big fan for a long time. It's just a pleasure. If you do that, people will give you a decent comeback. If you're like, hey, man, how you doing? It was so nice. Forget it. You have no shot. You go away. They don't have time for that. I'd actually met Willie Mays several times, and he just never remembered meeting me every time I met him, and it was just always fun, Athletes, celebrities, doesn't make any difference who they are. Just be respectful, and all will be okay.
Sure. That's definitely a good lesson for fans to learn if ever they actually do come across their hero. superheroes to just be a nice person. Don't fall all over them. They don't want that people screaming in their face like, oh my God, it's you. They just, hey, how you doing?
How you doing? Again, there are people that, they'll walk up to somebody like Tom Hanks and they'll do an impression of Forrest Gump, or they'll do something else. Or, Charlton Heston, somebody walks up, I am the Lord or whatever. It's like, no, just how you doing? How are you? Nice to meet you. Oh God, I'm just trying to think of other people that Richard Dreyfuss, you want to talk about a funny guy. I mean, he's just great. And again, it's 98% of the people that meet him or go to a show and meet him, are they going to get an autograph? It's about Jaws and whatever, and my background of knowing movies and stuff like that. I'm like, listen, how many years of the piano did you play? And he was kind of like thrown back that I would bring up the piano. And I said, the competition with him and A.V. Irving, like 1980, he goes, how old are you? My God, you know the competition. I said, yes, it's a great film and this and that. And then we talked about Let It Ride, and the fun things. But it's, hello, it's nice to meet you. How you doing?
No, I don't want to be a rude podcast, though. So tell me a little bit about Kidco.
I'm glad we have time because this is a great story. And again, this comes under, you have a lot of balls. So I booked Kidco and we had a 10-week shooting schedule. I'm in 98% of the movie. So I'm in basically every scene, but just a couple little things here and there. And I am ready to rock. I mean, I am prepared. I know the whole script backwards, forwards. Here we go. So we do the read through the day before we're going to start shooting. So I'm already in Tucson, Arizona. We got 10 weeks of shooting schedule. There's one glitch in this. 8 weeks in, the toy opened in the movie theaters. And I had to be out and about. I had to be ready to go for PR, this interview, that show, this show, that show. If I'm shooting a film, I can't do that. So we sit down, we do the table read. The producers on the show were Frank Yablans and David Niven Jr. They got about 80 years between them in show business. And Ron Maxwell, who was the director, he had done The Nights the Lights Went Out in Georgia, and then later he did Gettysburg. Extremely intelligent man. So we do the table read, and I said, hey, would you guys mind sticking around for a minute? I want to talk to you. Okay. Now this is 14 years old. I've done one movie. They're like, okay, what's up? So now it's down to me, my dad, producers, director, and first AD, first assistant director. That's all that's in the room. I said, listen, I got to tell you something. We got a 10-week shooting schedule. I got to be out of here in 8 weeks. The toy opens in 8 weeks in the theaters. We got to get this done. Frank Yablans looks at me and he goes, get the bleep out of here. So I just looked at him. He goes, get the bleep out of here. So my dad and I got up and they're like, no, just Scotty. Go to the game room, go play a video game for a minute. So I got out of the room. They start talking to my father and they're like, listen, movies don't get made faster. They get made slower. That's just how movie making goes. So if we need to replace your kid right now, if he's going to be unhappy, let's replace him. We'll call it a day. And my father goes, listen, you don't understand my kid. He just went through 4 months with Gleason and Pryor. He truly believes he's Godzilla. He's Secretariat. Just get on his back. He's going to ride you to the finish line. And they're looking at my father and that was it. They're like, you serious? Yeah. All right. So the first AD comes, gets me, brings me back in the room, says, okay, Scott, you need to do this in 8 weeks instead of 10 weeks. So what is the first thing you would like to do? They're calling the bluff of a 14-year-old with one movie under his belt. And I just pulled right out of my hat, pulled it right out. I said, I looked at the shooting schedule. Why are we shooting in the house over here? Then we're shooting over there. And then we got the barn scenes here, but the barn scenes are there. And they're just looking at me. And I go, I'd love to sit down with the first AD. Let's just redo some of the shooting schedule. I think that'll help us. They had nothing to say. There was nowhere to go. They couldn't just go, what? What did you say? That was the reaction, I know, though. And they went, okay. They grabbed the shooting schedule. The first AD and I sat there. Everybody else went to sleep. It was like 9:30 at this point. They all go to sleep. We had a 6 a.m. wake-up call the next day. For actor call was 6 a.m. I sat there with him till about 12:45 in the morning, moving stuff around in the shooting schedule. And believe it or not, we finished shooting Kidco in 8 weeks. The day the toy opened in the theaters, December 10th, was the day we finished shooting Kidco. I was working overtime every day. I mean, the kids that we had were great. The girls that played my sister, Cinnamon Isles, Tristan Schuyler, Elizabeth Gorsey, they were all terrific. They put up with my shenanigans. And I mean, I had fun. Even though I was serious in making sure we got done, I made sure everybody had fun because that's always been me. I just joke and make everybody laugh and okay. But Vincent Schiavarelli, there was the other FBI guy in the movie, and I can't think of his name, but they're like Benny Baker, who is an actor from the 30s, 40s, 50s. He plays the judge. There's a character actor, Basil Hoffman. Believe it or not, I still talk to him. Every once in a while, we still get together, for a cup of coffee at Bob's Big Boy, But that really, for me, to do what I did and get it done. Charlie Hallahan, a character actor. Now, you might not know him by name. You remember the movie The Thing, Kurt Russell? Okay. The guy whose head comes off the table, grows the legs, and crawls away. The big heavyset guy. That was Charlie Hallahan. He was my dad. He helped me with one of the scenes that I was having a problem with dialogue wise, but we did it after hours. I went to his room, knocked on the door and said, "Hey, I need help." And he knew that I was bringing it every day and he saw what I was doing. So he was more than willing to just, oh, absolutely. Let's get it done. Great crew, great cast, but for me, that's like my proudest thing was the fact that movies don't get made faster. They take longer, and I pulled it off. And it was great. Again, Christmas Story, it was like a vacation. I was working one day a week for 6 weeks, freezing our tushies off up in Canada and Cleveland. The tongue on the pole scene, who knew what it would become and what it was, what it's become. I was just like, okay. And Bob Clark's like, don't worry. I know that you're not the star of this movie. You're not Ralphie, you're Flick, but don't worry. It's not the size of the role, but what you make out of it. And you couldn't tell me 37 years later that people would still want to talk about it.
Well, I think with certain movies, when they strike a chord with people, that's probably what makes them so memorable. There were a lot of scenes in that movie that are very relatable, especially I think when you think about the Ralphie character, when he's a little kid and he's got all these fantasies. And I think a lot of young boys get like that, like, oh, I'm going to be a hero now and people are going to worship me.
Oh, sure. Well, especially go past the last 20, 30 years, you go past there, and then you had a lot more, we're all going to do this or do that, and especially like at that time, 40s, oh, you get a BB gun, you're going to shoot Black Bart in the ass, that was the fantasy sequences. A lot more kids did it then. Now I think that by the time kids are 5 years old, they're already playing video games and they're already someplace else. They don't have the same desires to be somebody else or to want to do something else other than what they see in front of them.
I guess the imagination kind of dwindles a little bit, where in earlier years, there was more that you had to do with it. You made do with it.
I mean, listen, I wanted to be Evel Knievel. Evel Knievel was my guy. I mean, I'm a 70s kid, So I mean, Snake River and flying over the sharks, Caesar's Palace, and all that stuff. I used to have a BMX bike, and we had a long sidewalk in front of my house, and it would go down to 2 steps that went down to the driveway. Well, the maniac I was, Evel Knievel Schwartz here, here we go. And I would ride my bike down the walkway, but I set up a plastic sled that had cinder blocks underneath it, and it would act as a ramp, and I would jump off of that. And it's a good 6-foot drop onto my driveway, but on the other side of the driveway was a picket fence from the next door neighbor. So I had to slam on my brakes, and I'm crashing into this thing constantly. But I mean, that was the stuff I did. Other than, again, crazy things in life. There was a wrestler back in the 80s and 90s named Jimmy Superfly Snuka. And if you remember what he did, he used to get on the corner of the ring and he would leap
the top rope. Sure.
Exactly. Okay. When there was more than about 2 to 3 feet of snow around my house, I used to go on the roof of my house
and jump into the snow
and dive and just take that leap into the snow in front of my house. I was nuts. But that's what I wanted to do, And then I did the snooker one more than the Randy Savage one. But then I ended up, a couple of years ago doing a wrestling thing down in Mississippi, and there was no way and no how I wasn't going to do the top rope leap. I went and trained at a local wrestling school here with a friend of mine, Bo Cooper. He's in Moore Park, California. And I told him what I was doing. He's like, okay. And he just got me up in the ring, up in the corner, just leaping, And I did it maybe 15 or 20 times. He goes, dude, you know what you're doing. Don't worry about it. And then I got a chance to do it. And there I am in front of 1,000, 1,200 people, whatever it was, in this casino. And Jerry Lawler's holding the guy's legs. And I just took the leap off the top rope and gave him the flying Macho Man elbow. So there's the fantasy from the 7, 8, 9, 10, 12-year-old kid, and then he does it at 50, and it was great. I got to give that one shout out to Jimmy Blaylock, Hollywood Jimmy Blaylock down in Mississippi. He's the one that allowed me to do that. So, and Stan Sierra, who I landed on. Those are my guys, man. That was a fantasy come true.
I want to jump back to your movie career from when you were younger. You made a movie called A Time to Live with Liza Minnelli, and you met somebody who became a longtime friend too, a fellow child actor named Corey Haim.
Yeah, it was a TV movie of the week, and Liza was my mom. Jeff DeMunn was the father. And Corey Haim and I were brothers. And then we became brothers for the rest of his life.
And I know it must have been kind of rough when he passed because you were still in touch with him.
We both had each other's phone numbers. And then I came out to LA in the beginning of 87. And by the end of 87, him and his father came out from Toronto. And we ended up together in an apartment building. Because if you rent two places, we can get a deal, that's what we thought. So we ended up in the same apartment building together. We were friends the whole way. I saw him 2 weeks before he passed. I miss that kid. Good heart, not a bad bone in his body, just a sweet, sweet man. And the world is not a better place for him not being here.
I guess that does probably happen with a lot of former child actors when they're coming into adulthood. There are different temptations, and a lot of them seem to deal with it differently. Some of them are so well adjusted, and others I think they kind of fall into the trap where everything is at your disposal and you don't know how to handle it.
But there's a lot of variables that go with it. It's who you hang out with, the group of people, your mindset and your education as far as things to do, things not to do. He just went and met the wrong people. And even though there were some of them were nice people, that's kind of irrelevant. They got him to do the wrong things, and that happens. Me, on the other hand, I had Richard Pryor, and that sounds nuts. But literally, the man said to me, you will have every phone number of mine. If you have a question about life at any point or anything about life, whether it's drugs, alcohol, women, smoke, crack, whatever it is, I don't care. You got a question, you can call me. So he was my muse. So I knew what crack cocaine was. I knew what cocaine was. I knew what being an alcoholic meant. By the time I was 16, 17 years old, Haim didn't have that. Now, of course, it really has nothing to do with him passing away, because he passed away from the walking pneumonia, which is the same thing Brittany Murphy had and her husband had, and they're both gone within the same year. Everybody is different in how they deal with success, what they do, how they do it, their background. Nobody is truly prepared. Nobody. From being nobody to a TV star in 6 months. It just doesn't happen that way. Whether it's Todd Bridges or Dana Plato or Gary or Corey or whomever, and there's been loads of them along the way. The DUIs, the drug offenses, the whatever. Again, you just no way to understand it unless you've been in it. People say, oh, well, I would have done this. Really? You would have. Sure, you would have. Oh, by the way, did you go to the movies last night? Well, yeah, I did. Great. Did anybody come and ask for your autograph? Were there people around you? People talking about? No, exactly. You can't go to the grocery store. You can't go to the movies. You can't go to a peaceful dinner at a quiet restaurant because you become the talk. Even, and I don't, this is not an ego thing. Right after I did the toy and the toy came out in the theaters, there was a mall a couple miles from my house that I used to go to all the time. And it got to the point where I could hear people 50 feet away. I could hear, that's the guy. That's the guy. To hear that, I always went with friends of mine, whatever. Then I had one friend that we always hung out together. His name is Andy. He was my bodyguard. He was my boy, but we were homies, And he would say to me, how the hell can you hear that? And I'm like, dude, I can just hear it. And he would always turn around and he would look in their direction. People would be looking at us and pointing. And he goes, unbelievable. How the hell you can hear that? It just becomes second nature. Yeah, there's nothing to prepare you, for what it all encompasses. Some people, the pressure is too much. And I go, listen, if you're going to tell me that you're on a TV show, forget how much money you make. That's kind of irrelevant. And your job is to go sit in a studio and be interviewed by people, and this is hard and pressure, you're in the wrong job. You need to go get a real job. Go do something that pays $15-20 an hour. And, by the way, you can't live in your house anymore because you can't afford that. So you live in a one-bedroom apartment that's $500 a month with alcoholics and drug addicts, that live next door to you. Go ahead. Now tell me where the pressure is. Richard was a tremendous source of knowledge for me. He was my muse. He was my go-to. I could ask him anything. We talked about ego. I said, Richard, this was 5 years later when I moved to California. And I said, Richard, you're the number one stand-up in the world. The movies. And he goes, uh-huh. I said, you have no ego. None at all. You have no ego. He goes, how much does that pay? And I said, well, it's not a job. He goes, no, I understand that. He goes, it's a mindset. He goes, if it's not going to help me take care of my family, my home, my cars, the shit I need to take care of, I don't need to have it. It's a waste of time. That's a great piece of advice. It was something else for me to put in the bank of my brain of him to have taught me about life. I've always been pretty grounded, other than maybe like 1 or 2 days in my life where I wasn't so grounded, but it is what it is.
We can let those slide, Scott. It's okay.
Oh no, listen, I got home from the toy and I had thrown a barbecue for all of my friends. And my parents, while I was shooting the film, they actually put a deck in the back of our home. We had a ranch style house in New Jersey. They put a deck on the back of the house. So this is the first time I'm seeing it. I just gotten back. This is great. We're having a barbecue, whatever. And my head was up my tush. There was no question. I hadn't, my head was out of whack in the ego and the whole thing. But I had done my 4 months prior release or whatever. And it was my friend Kenny, Andy, Jimmy LaRue, Bobby Janone. Those were my boys. And they came over and they're like, you're being an ass. If you're going to keep doing this, we're going to go home. Checkmate. I'm done.
It seems that you definitely had a lot of grounding characters through your life and through your career who kind of kept you on the straight and narrow.
People said, who's been the most influential? It's like Richard Pryor. No doubt about it. I was very lucky, very fortunate that I worked with good people, but at the same time, I always kind of go back to the beginning. My love of movies and entertainment gave me an education about movies, not about movie making, but about movies. So when I would sit and talk with Jackie Gleason, there were some questions, Smokey invented this or that, but I wanted to know about The Hustler and Paul Newman, and I wanted to know about his days in vaudeville. Did he do burlesque shows? Did he do, that kind of stuff? They didn't see me as the kid. They would call me the kid. Hey, kid, come here. But they didn't treat me that way. They treated me like an adult. I was much more mature than my age. I had a really good head on my shoulders as a youngster. So I believe that truly helped me in my experiences doing 140 commercials in Broadway and off Broadway, doing Broadway with John Carradine, the father of Keith and David and Robert. And at the time he was an old man, he was only, I think he passed 3 or 4 years after we did Frankenstein on Broadway. And I'm asking him about shooting The House of Frankenstein in 1935 or whatever it was. It was just amazing, the amount of education that I was given because I was inquisitive. I wanted to learn things. I wasn't the typical, hey, let's go play games. Nope, that wasn't me. I made jokes. I had a sense of humor, of course, but I wasn't stupid.
Could you tell me a little bit about A Minor Consideration?
Minor Consideration is a nonprofit 501c3 that was started by Paul Peterson, who was in the Donna Reed show. Mm-hmm. And he started it back in 88, 89. And it's for child labor laws. It helps different states bring up the labor laws to sort of where California, New York, Illinois is. I was the president for a couple of years, which is all you can serve because it's a 501c3. You can only do 2 years. Okay, fine. They have hotlines and they help people who have financial difficulties or they have psychological difficulties or somebody needs a doctor and they can't afford it or whatever it may be. Former child stars, current child stars, and hopefully future child stars. They've done a lot of good work over the few decades. And there are some great people that are still there trying to get states that are behind. The Coogan Act, which is part of your income as a child actor, goes into a fund, a bank account for you, a trust fund until you're 18. Well, everybody thinks that's nationwide, you see. So like when I shot my movies, the Coogan Act was there. I never shot a movie in California. I shot in Tucson, Arizona, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Cleveland, and Canada. I never had a Coogan account. Or if I did, it had something small in it. That's because the states don't make sure that money goes into a Coogan account. They just don't have it. To them, you might as well be speaking Chinese. They're trying to get the Coogan Act enacted in all 50 states. A lot of problems with kids on reality shows that aren't getting paid. Their parents are getting paid money, but the kids aren't getting paid. There's a lot of things that still need to be changed, but it's a process and it's a slow process when you consider all the things that go on in government and all the things that people have something to worry about. Child labor laws is not one of them. I don't care what it is. If you see anything that has to do with kids, nothing ever moves fast. The website is aminorconsideration.org, and it's a good cause.
Now, I know you can't really talk about your upcoming projects right now. Can you give a slight hint?
I can say that there's a bunch of former child stars that are going to be in it. It's just hilarious. I've done shows in the past, and sometimes it's okay. Whatever. This is actually pretty funny. We're making each other laugh, and it's just a good thing. People will enjoy it.
It's great that you can come full circle to do something like that too.
We are, for the most part, I don't say completely, but for the most part, we're a pretty tight-knit group of people. Again, unless you're a former child actor, child star, whatever you want to call it, you don't understand what you go through. Like Erin Murphy, who was Tabitha on Bewitched, Keith Coogan, myself, Allison Ingram, Todd Bridges, Brad Keston, who was the voice of Charlie Brown. It's probably 100 of us. Now, we all don't get together and talk all the time. Moosey Dryer, who was in American Hot Wax, and he did TV shows in the 70s. But we're a fun group, and we kind of all know what we've all gone through, the different things, and we've all sat and talked about it. One of the most fun things normally, or in the beginning, we talked about a lot was our parents, because I didn't talk about my own dad. I would talk about somebody else's dad. I remember your father, and your father was this, or your father was that, or your mom was this, and your mom was. It was funny that, some of us figured out, somebody's mom had the hots for a father and the father had the hots for a mom. Not that anybody ever did anything, but it was just funny. So many years later, you look back. Mason Reese from New York, he comes out a couple times a year and comes to, our things. Sarah Monahan, she was in the show Oh Dad over in Australia as a kid. But we're kind of scattered all over the place, Glenn Scarpelli is in Arizona. There's so many people in New York. Jennifer Blanc is here in L.A. She did half the shows on TV. I think she was on Angel. I know she's on Saved by the Bell. She did Married with Children, all that kind of stuff. Maddie Corman, who was in The Adventures of Fort Fairlane. She played Zuzu Petals, the kind of ditzy girl in the movie. But she's just finished up doing a one-woman show on Off-Broadway last year. She's wonderful. April Haney from Saved by the Bell, from Charles in Charge, Willie Ames and Scott Baio. It's like we all know what we all went through. Sure. So we're kind of just this group of dysfunctional, functioning people, because we're all dysfunctional. We're all crazy in some form or way. We see each other and there's like a different connection amongst all of us.
We've been talking to Mr. Scott Schwartz, and I'd like to thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming down to the Sherpa Chalet.
You got it.
Thanks again for listening to the Sherpa Screening Room, a presentation of Too Many Podcasts. This has been your buddy, Jim the Podcast Sherpa, and you can hear this show on your favorite podcast app or at my website, Sherpalution.com. Don't forget, you can follow me on social media on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter at what else? Sherpalution, of course. If you can, please leave a nice review for my show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or iHeartRadio. This is I Was a Child Actor Week, so we've got more stories. So make sure you stick around and subscribe. And this way you can hear everything else that we've got to offer you. And in the meantime, Mr. Bruce, could you take care of this? I think that my tongue is stuck to the microphone. Viva la Sherpalution!
Thanks for listening to Too Many Podcasts. Please disperse. You can go home now. I said you can go home now. Viva la Sherpalution. Viva la Sherpalution. Oh. Yeah, I'll come back now, you hear?